Before this story starts, I want you to think about something. How much of your life did you choose, and how much of it simply accumulated? The job that made sense at the time, the obligations that arrived one by one, the version of yourself that everyone expects. This story is about the man who taught us that creation is not about adding, it is about removing. In a city of artisans, there was one sculptor whose work stopped people in the street. Not because it was grand or imposing, but because it felt impossibly alive. People who stood before his sculptures reported something strange. They said the figures did not look carved. They looked found, as if they had always existed and someone had simply uncovered them. His name was Arlo, and he had been working with stone for 40 years. His workshop was full of dust and light and the quiet sound of careful work. One morning, a young student arrived. His name was Dario. He was 23 years old and wanted to learn everything. He sat in the corner of the workshop and watched Arlo work for 3 days without speaking. On the 4th day, he asked, "How do you do it?" Arlo kept working without looking up. He said, "How do I do what?" Dario said, "Create something so alive from something so plain." Arlo set down his tool. He looked at the block of stone in front of him. Then he said something Dario would spend 20 years trying to understand. "I do not create anything. The figure already exists inside the stone. Every block of stone contains exactly one perfect figure. My job is not to put something in. My job is to take everything else out." Dario looked at the stone block. He said, "But how do you know what to remove?" "You look at the stone for a long time. You learn its weight, its grain, its resistance. And slowly, the stone begins to tell you what it is not." Dario said, "What if you remove something you should not have?" Arlo smiled. He said, "That is the only real mistake a sculptor ever makes." Not adding too little, not working too slowly, removing what belongs. Dario worked in Arlo's workshop for 3 years. He learned the tools. He learned the stone. He learned patience. He learned to look at a block for a long time before touching it. And then life called him away. A family, a career, a city far from the workshop. The obligations that arrive when you are young and say yes before you understand what you are agreeing to. 20 years passed. Dario became successful in the way that the world recognizes success. A good position, a comfortable home, a full calendar, a long list of responsibilities. He was not unhappy exactly, but there was something, a persistent feeling he had carried for years that he could not name. Like wearing a coat that was almost the right size. Functional, presentable, fine, but not quite his. He had accumulated a life the way some people accumulate objects, one thing at a time, each one making sense when it arrived. The job, because it was sensible. The committee, because someone asked. The obligation, because it would have been rude to refuse. Each addition reasonable. Each addition small. Until one morning he sat at his desk before anyone else was awake and looked at his calendar and his inbox and his list of obligations and felt something he had not felt in 20 years, the feeling of being inside a block of stone. He sat with that feeling for a long time, and for the first time in 20 years, he thought about Arlo, about the workshop, about the dust and the light and the sound of careful work. About the morning Arlo had said, "The figure already exists inside the stone. My job is not to put something in. My job is to take everything else out." Dario looked at his calendar again. He looked at his list of obligations. He looked at the version of himself that showed up every day to meet everyone else's expectations. And he understood, for the first time, what Arlo had actually been teaching him. Not just about stone, about everything. He had spent 20 years adding to his life. Every addition made sense at the time. Every addition had a reason. But somewhere in all that adding, he had buried the figure. The version of himself that had existed before the obligations arrived. The one who had sat in a dusty workshop at 23 and watched a man work with stone, and felt more himself than he had felt at any point in the 20 years since. He picked up his pen, and he began to remove things from his calendar. Not dramatically, not all at once. Just one. Then another. The committee he had joined because someone asked. The obligation he had accepted because it would have been rude to refuse the real one. That evening, he called Arlo. The old sculptor was still working, still in the same workshop. Dario told him what had happened, what he had understood. Arlo listened for a long time. Then he said, "It takes most people 20 years to understand the first lesson."
Dario said, "What is the second lesson?" "The second lesson is this. Removing is harder than adding. Anyone can add. Adding is easy. Adding feels productive. You can add all day and feel you have done something. But removing requires you to look honestly at what is there and ask, does this belong? Not, is this useful? Not, did someone give it to me? Not, would it be rude to let it go? Does this belong to me? Here is what this story holds for us today. Most of us build our lives the way Dario did. One addition at a time. Each one sensible. Each one small. Each one arriving with a reason. Until one morning we sit at our desk before anyone else is awake and look at everything we have built and feel the coat that is almost the right size. The life you want is not waiting to be built. It is waiting to be uncovered. It already exists inside everything you currently are. Your job is simply to remove what is not it. Not all at once, not dramatically, just one thing. The obligation that was never yours. The expectation you are performing for someone who never asked. The version of yourself you built for other people's comfort. Remove one, then another, and slowly the figure will emerge. It was always there, waiting. Thank you for being here today. If this story found you at the right moment, share it with someone carrying a life that belongs mostly to other people. Leave a comment below with one word. I read every single one.
Subscribe to Tale Studio Stories for a new wisdom tale every week. Stories that slow you down and help you find what was always there. Until next time, remove one thing.